anybody came in, later, to do exactly what Hannah's doing and just get one of those documents off the top of that pile. So after today, everything is on Edmodo, or on the Discord, so that's why, if you haven't done it yet, your homework for today was to make sure you get set up on both those websites. It's vital that you be on there, and your special day that things are due is what? Good job, yeah, well, okay, alright. So what we're gonna do today is talk about some writing stuff. So, I wanna just kinda introduce my philosophy about any reading material that I give you. Some teachers like assign you something and then get, we used to say butt hurt, but like get bent out of shape or offended if you don't like what they give you. And that's not my philosophy. Sometimes I'm even giving you a piece of reading that I want you to pick apart. I might be giving you something that I know is a bad argument and I want you to explain to me why. So if you don't like something that I give you, that's okay. I'm not pressed about it. I'm not bent out of shape. But my personal motto, and this applies to all classes that I teach, when it comes to anything I give you to read or to watch, is you don't have to like it, but you do have to learn from it. Because as long as you're still engaging and trying to ask questions and try to dialogue with it, then you don't have to like it, that's fine. But there's gonna be plenty of things in life that we don't like that we still have to try and learn from and grow from. So that's my whole teacher philosophy. My old boss's philosophy used to be work hard and be nice, and that's a pretty good one too. So the case for bad coffee, having read it, again, super short, does anybody feel like they could tell me, why, hey, God, just get one of these little suckers right here before you sit down. Why did Keith go from being a coffee snob to just not giving a damn? What made him change his mind?
Because, like, over time, over the course of life, he realized that every time he had a cup of coffee, like, with different people, you know, there's usually never, like, a good cup of coffee. It's always, like, that really crappy coffee. But the time that he was having was great, so that's what made the coffee good. So he realized that the bad coffee was better than the good coffee because he was spending more time with the coffee instead of the people.
Because when you're just going to cheer somebody up after they've lost a loved one, you're not going to go buy and use your French press and get like a special like caramel frappe. You know, you're just going to bring them a good basic solid cup of coffee. Your memory's great. That's perfect. That was a really great summation of the essay. Is he talks about basically in all the really important moments of your life, it's bad coffee that's there for you. It's bad coffee that's the constant. And also he just got to the point where it just wasn't worth dealing with all the accoutrements anymore. You know, he just didn't really have the energy anymore because he wanted to be there for the bad coffee that had been there for him. Do you remember when I asked you a couple days ago about have you been through a hobby that you're just not into anymore and you have all this leftover stuff and whatever? Okay, so mine is scuba. I am scuba certified. Like I have my little card, and we got certified for our wedding elopement. Basically, we ran off the Caribbean, just the two of us, and I wanted to be prepared. And I did the whole thing, even though the instructor hated me because I was in a class. It was me and my husband and a motorcycle gang called the Roughnecks, which is made up of. It's like a legit MC club made up of firefighters. So these are people like at peak physical condition, like who can do anything. And anything he asked them to do, they could do in a heartbeat. And meanwhile, he's like, do 8 laps across the pool. And I mean, you can see me, I'm like, oh God. Like one of the hardest things in the class was that you have to be loaded up with all your gear and you have to get out of the pool with just your arms. And I'm more of a quad person. That's where more of my strength is. And that was rough. And so he was like, all right, everybody, we'll just sit around and wait on Maggie. And it was like super stressful. And I was like trying to get out of the pool. But I did it. Like I made it. But over the course of doing the class, it wasn't just because of the instructor. I realized that I don't actually like scuba because it's too complicated. I love snorkeling and I love swimming and I like free diving and just going down. But all the equipment and all the 10,000 things, has anybody done scuba? Yeah, so you're familiar with it. The 10,000 things you have to think of at the same time, and like, what if my O-ring blows, or what's my PSI, what's my ballast, do I have to drop these weights, do I have to put these weights on? It was just too much, and it was taking the joy out of the water for me. And that's kind of where he gets to with his coffee, is he's so involved in the little details of it that he sort of forgot the reason why coffee's great in the first place, is that it's kind of this bonding agent. It's a communal thing, the way he talks about it. So let's actually look at one of the paragraphs that he writes. Let's look at turn to page 157, and it is, we'll start at paragraph 8. Just kind of go from there, and I just want you to pay attention to the type of writing that he uses here. And again, Maggie, you couldn't have said it better. It was a perfect summation of the whole point of the essay. But I'll start with 8, and then I will pick on some chosen victims to continue reading for me. But perhaps my newfound allegiance to the House of Maxwell is that I simply prefer it over the expensive stuff, which, don't get me wrong, I still occasionally enjoy. Cheap coffee is one of America's most unsung comfort foods. It's as warming and familiar as homemade lasagna or a 6-hour stew. It tastes of midnight diners and Tom Waits songs, ice cream and cigarettes with a dash of Swiss Miss. It makes me remember the best cup of coffee I ever had. Even though there was never just one best cup, there were hundreds. Gabby, can you read paragraph 9?
The best cup of coffee I ever had was a leftover swig of overly cream and sugar pastry choice my father would always leave in his mug when he departed for work each morning. I would come downstairs in my pajamas and down it like a shot when I was just 9 years old. It was the Folgers my father and I drank out of the styrofoam cups 5 years later while attending his Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in a church basement off a suburban commercial strip.
Camden, would you do paragraph 10, sorry.
The best cup of coffee I ever had was the dirty Viennese blend my teenage friends and I would sit out of Chip's ceramic mug at a cafe near the University of Cincinnati while smoking clove cigarettes and listening to the Sisters of Mercy records. Imagining what it would be like to be older than we were. The best cup of coffee was the one I enjoyed alone each morning during my freshman year at Ohio State. Huddled in the back of a Rack's restaurant reading the college paper and dealing with the onset of an anxiety disorder that would never quite be cured.
Very good, both of you, nice work. So again, he paints you a series of moments, kind of like he did at the beginning when he was talking about being a young man. And it's not just that he tells you this stuff happened. The reason I picked this essay for you to read is the way he uses sensory detail. So it's not just, I did this or I did that. He talks about the feel of the pajamas, the feel of the styrofoam cup, the way that the coffee smells, the way that it tastes, the way that anxiety like builds up in your stomach. Have you ever like had a day where you're like, I don't know if something's wrong with my stomach or if I'm just nervous, or if one is causing the other, and it's just this endless loop of stomach anxiety stuff. That feeling, he encapsulates all that really well with this sensory detail. And so the reason I had you read The Case for Bad Coffee is because it perfectly envelops what we're going to be working on this unit, which is simply called thick description. And I always have to stipulate with my 16-year-old boy students that it's not with 2 C's. But this is what we're going to be working on. And I'm going to give you a definition, and you just need to write this down. You can write it down anywhere. You can write it down on a piece of paper I gave you. You can write it down on your laptop. Whatever you want to do, whatever you want to write. It's not long, but I just want to give you this definition just to remember what this thing is. So thick description is what we're working on. And here's the definition of what that is. And I'll repeat it several times. Don't worry, today's not going to be a definition day, it's just this one. So thick description, full, comma, detailed description full, comma, detailed description intended to give a mental image of something experienced. So I'll repeat the whole thing. Full, comma, detailed description intended to give a mental image of something experienced. I'm going to read the rest of the definition, but you don't have to write it down. Significant thick description provides details that would be meaningful to an outsider or someone unfamiliar with the group, place, or thing being described. So it kind of is what it says. I mean, the definition is, or the word is sort of self-explanatory. It's the type of writing where you are zeroed in on this one particular thing or place, whatever that is, and you are just giving really intense, focused description about that thing. So like if it's your shoelace, you are going ham on describing that shoelace. You are going full Sherlock Holmes on that shoelace. Every little fiber, every little pattern, how does it feel in between your fingers? Is it muddy? What does it smell like? Don't put it in your mouth, but those sorts of things, all those kind of sensory details. Really the key with thick description as opposed to regular description is the 5 senses, if you want to just remember your hand. You're not just describing how a situation looks. You are describing how it sounds. You're describing if there's a taste to what you're experiencing. You're describing how it feels, how it smells. And the whole point of it is that if I were to close my eyes and listen to your description, that's that mental image. I would basically feel like I was there. Like you are painting a picture for me, you're painting an entire moment in 3D, to where when I listen to you or where I read your description, I feel like I'm in that place. That's what thick description is. Now, it's probably kind of, again, elementary to you, probably like I practiced this before. But actually, as a society, we are kind of losing our ability to focus on one thing for a long time. We are extremely distracted. And I mean, I say we, I'm absolutely included in that. I mean, I probably talked to you the other day about how it's hard for me to even go into a room and remember why I went into the room anymore, because there's so much going on. And then I'll turn around and get involved in something else and completely forget that I was supposed to do laundry or whatever it was. And I think living in an electronic world amplifies that, because we have so much going on, so many notifications, so much on the computer, so many ways for people to reach out to us, or things to happen, games to play, stuff to be done, that it's really actually more and more difficult for us as human beings to just sit and be like, I'm gonna look at this flower, and I'm gonna describe this flower. In Catcher in the Rye, which was published I think in 1950, this assignment that one of Holden Caulfield's friends has to do is just a descriptive essay on a baseball glove, like a whole page, just describe this baseball glove. He ends up paying Holden Caulfield to do it, but like if you gave that to a kid now, they would probably squirm, because the idea of having to sit for like 30 minutes and just describe one thing would drive most of them up the wall, because that's just not the way we live our lives anymore. So it's really about just learning to develop that attention to detail. That's why we start with doing this. Because once you cultivate that attention to detail, which we don't normally give to things, you can apply it to anything. You can apply it to a situation, to a performance, to a debate, to a crime scene, to a whole group of people, to a country, whatever you want to, whatever your interest level is. But again, think about Sherlock Holmes and the way that he notices details that other people miss, and that's actually his whole deal. That's why when he first meets somebody, he's able to see, oh, you just came back from Afghanistan, and they think that he's a wizard, but really he just notices things other people don't. That's all thick description is me training you or retraining you to be able to do that in a world where everything is so busy all the time. So there's another aspect to thick description that's really helpful. Whenever people go physically somewhere to study something, whether they're like anthropologists or creative writers, it's often called field work. It just means I'm going into the field. So like if you're studying chimpanzees, it means that instead of being in front of a computer, you will go to Africa and study chimpanzees. Now why you would want to study chimpanzees is beyond me, because I find them horrifying. But if you wanted to do, right, they're just scary, but if you wanted to do that, you would go to Africa to do that field work. There are many different ways that you can observe in the field, out in nature or wherever you're going. You can take video recordings, you can take pictures, you can take regular notes. I'm just going to teach you this one particular thing for this class that we're going to use, so go ahead and pull up this little handout that I had you pick up. And if you have me for Comp 2, if you decide to suffer through the Bolden experience again for Comp 2, then we will also use this for Comp 2. This is something else we use. So you don't have to remember this, but a lady named Anne Berthoff came up with this concept, and it's called the double entry notebook. And the point of the double entry notebook is, as you take notes on something, whatever it is, if you're observing something, you can use it for science classes, like if you're looking at a human body, whatever you are looking at, it's a way to separate what is actually there from your feelings about what is actually there. Because we talk all the time about how everybody has an inherent bias all the time, even if we don't know it. The double entry notebook is the way to remove that and separate your opinions from what you're actually seeing. So if you look at it, I just did an example on, and remember I talked the other day about how you're about to find out what a mess I am. I just gave you an example on my hypothetical bedroom. This is when I had an apartment. When I moved into a house, for some reason, I started caring a lot more. I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's not as much of a disaster as it was when I was in an apartment. But my room is always a disaster. So when you're taking notes on something, doing it by hand, first thing you do, if you have a piece of paper, you just get your pen or pencil and you just draw a line down the middle. You just bisect it. You just draw that line. So the left side is for the objective, which means the facts. If you remember, or if your parents watched a show called Dragnet, Just the Facts, ma'am, it's that kind of approach. So it's what's there, what you see, what you feel, what you smell, what you hear, just the factual input of the place around you, or what you're looking at. That's what goes in the left-hand column. So the right-hand column is your subjective, which means that's up to you, that's your feelings, response to that input. Whatever feeling or reaction or opinion or response you have, that goes in the right-hand column. So as you're observing a place or observing a thing, what you actually see and what you actually experience goes here. Your personal response to those things goes here. You may not have a response to everything. It may just be like, I see a red shoe on the ground that's a little tattered on the side. You may not have a reaction to that, and that's okay, you just move on. So this column may have more in it than this one does. But any kind of thing that, like, kind of like sonar, if you get a little ping, if there's anything that pings in your heart for whatever reason, you put that in this column. So this is just an example of what mine was. So like when I describe basically on the left, I'm looking around at all the things that I see. Just stuff that's kind of scattered everywhere. I used to have this thing called Laundry Mountain where it was all clean, but I just made a pile. And it just never quite got to its destination. Like in between Laundry Mountain and the drawer, I would just end up wearing it again. And so clean Laundry Mountain just kept piling up. And so that's just what I see. My emotions to that were self-hatred, because I grew up being told no one is ever going to want to marry you because you are so messy. And I grew up with parents to whom this is very unacceptable, but for some reason the more shame and disgust that they expressed, the messier I became. I don't know what it was. It wasn't like intentional rebellion, but so it is. I'm just a chaos monster. So these are all my feelings about the fact that I was messy. And again, this is just an example. This was what it smells like. I usually like there to be some kind of smell. I don't know, either a candle going or a diffuser going or something, and that's still the case. I didn't have any feelings about that, so I just kept moving on. The closet door, that's something that I could see, and then I wrote how much I loved my closet. That was a feeling. I also have a memory that I did not put in there because I did not want to get in trouble, but I will share it with you. Do you ever have an alcohol that you've had to break up with? Like a type of drink that you're like, we're done. I'm never drinking you again. A lot of you are not 21 yet, so we're just going to pretend that I'm not having this conversation with you. But, so when you are past 21 and legally drinking, there might be a type of alcohol that you're like, we just don't get along anymore. So mine is moonshine, because I liked it. I legitimately liked the taste of it, and I didn't realize how much I was actually drinking. And I don't actually drink that much, partly because of this incident that I'm about to tell you about. But for my birthday, we went to Pigeon Forge one year, and they had that at the island, the Smoky Mountain Moonshine Company, and they like let you go sample, and it's super fun. And they had this one, I want to say it was called like Blue Lightning. Mm-hmm. Like yeah.
They still have it, it's really good.
I loved it. It was so good. Yeah. So I was like, I want that one. And so I bought it, and we took it home. And Phil was like, let's play a board game. And like, I started mixing it with cherry Coke. And I used to have this thing where, I basically learned like, just have one drink. Just have your one drink, and then you're fine. But when I was younger, I used to be like, I feel good, so I'm gonna keep drinking so that I can keep feeling good. And I didn't realize, like, no, that's how you go too far. That's how you get in trouble. Brady feels me on this, yeah. So I just kept making more cherry coke with moonshine, and Phil said before he knew it, he looked over and that jar was gone. Like I had just decimated the whole jar. Now at this point in the story, I have no more memory of what happened. Okay, like there's a period where I'm like, this is basically my PSA of be careful with moonshine, that's what this is. But I blacked out, and I ended up crawling from the living room into that closet that I described in there with Laundry Mountain on it. And I'm crawling into the closet, and I crawl on top of the Laundry Mountain, and it feels like, what are you doing in there? And I think in my subconscious mind, I had already skipped to being sick. Like the fun time was over, and I needed to get somewhere where it was completely dark. And I knew that that closet was like my shelter. That was like my migraine shelter. But Phil decided to mess with me, and so the only part that I remember is I'm laying like barely able to move on top of the clean laundry, like flopping around in the closet, and I look up and his face is like framed by the light, and he literally goes, "This is what you deserve, this is where you live now," and shut the door and slammed me in there. And that was the last thing I heard. And then I was so like completely blacked out and unable to move that I kept trying to get out of the closet for the next like 5 hours, and I could not reach the doorknob to get out, and I was stuck in there. And so that actually incident really forever changed my drinking habits and definitely made me never drink moonshine again. But that is, if I were being honest with myself, if I weren't preparing this for somebody technically to come in one day and audit and look at my teaching materials, that would be an honest memory that I had when I looked at my closet. Every time I looked at that apartment closet, I'd be like, because I would remember how miserable I was and what a bad decision I made that day. So another thing that you might write about in that column here is memories. You might see things that remind you of things, especially if you're looking around a space that is yours. You're going to see things and be like, oh my God, Travis gave me that at prom. I remember, that was so special. You know, whatever it is, whatever the memory is, that's another type of response that you can have. Please don't report me for telling you that story. Snitches get stitches. Okay, so the fan blades on the top, talking about fan, reminders, things I need to do. And then I talked to you before about sheets and how I'm a sheet snob. So the sheets made me feel comfy and safe and kind of squiggly and stuff like that. So this is just an example of how to do double entry notes if you are just a ratchet mess like I am. So one thing that we're going to do now, it's 9:53, if you have a piece of paper, if you can find one, go ahead and get it out. If not, you can just flip over this handout and use this handout. But get a piece of paper or just flip over that sheet that I just gave you and take your writing utensil and go ahead and just draw a line down the middle, whatever you're writing on. We're going to practice taking some thick description double entry notes. So just draw a line down the center of that sucker. Draw a line down the middle. And remember, on the left, it's just going to be your input. What you see, open up all your senses. What you hear, what you smell, what you feel. That's going to go on the left. On the right are any responses that you have. And responses can take many forms. Like I said, it can be memories, it can be questions. Like, why is it that way? That's stupid. I don't understand. It can be opinions. It can be any kind of reaction or response. So here's what I'm going to have you do for the next few minutes. And I apologize because, this isn't going to matter so much because it's our last day here, but usually this activity, awakens some OCD tendencies in people that they didn't realize they had. But what I want you to do is observe the classroom. I want you to just look at the space that you are in, and there's nothing in particular that I want you to notice. Just see what jumps out to you and take double entry notes with all your 5 senses about the space that you are in. The only thing I'm asking is don't write anything mean about the people around you, like her shirt is ugly. This is going to do that. Otherwise, everything's good. So just take double entry notes using big descriptions on the space around you for the next few minutes. Go do it. Have fun. Go ahead and wrap up whatever notation you're on. And I just wanna take a few minutes and collect the input that you noticed, and your feelings about it. So you don't have to give me everything. When I call on you, just give me one thing that you noticed, and if you had a response to that thing, if you had a reaction to that thing. Krista, give me one thing you noticed in the classroom.
The standard whiteboard with semi-erased marker.
I'm so sorry. I heard you said the whiteboard and,
Yeah, it's the whiteboard with a semi-erased marker.
okay, did you have a response to that?
Yeah, it made me feel like I needed to go to the whiteboard and clean it off to look better.
Raise your hand if you also wrote that. That comes up every time. That are clean. And a lot of this is me actually, cause I teach in this room a lot, so, good, that was a good one. Mackenzie, give me one thing. And did you have a response to that? Baxter. I think everyone has a desk today though, because we have 2 people absent, so that works out okay. Thank you, Mackenzie. Meg, give me one thing you noticed.
Oh, I used the whiteboard too.
Okay, so you also have whiteboard. Give me something other than these 2 things if you have it, Melissa.
Hand sanitizer.
Any response?
No.
Jimmy, what about you?
I did the light fixtures.
Okay, did you have any response to that?
Yeah, it reminded me of like my high school. They were way dirtier, so.
What? That's good, I guess that's an awesome fixture, and so he had a memory. Good. Josh, give me one of yours.
The sound of the AC.
Good, so, okay, it's good to have the sound one in here. Any response?
Makes me think of my dad who works on air conditioning.
Oh, that's actually, that's good. Okay, so another memory. Even though it's dead. Who else should I pick on? Right,
I did the whiteboard too.
okay. And did you have any other type of response to it, or was it also?
Just to clean it.
I also want to clean it, makes sense. Camden?
I put the clock because it reminds me of like high school and school and everything.
So it's interesting, this room probably has a pretty similar vibe to some of the high school rooms that you were in, so, clock. High school. I already asked you this on the first day and I just forgot, so I'm sorry. How many of you, did any of you recently graduate from Clinton? Okay. Do you know a gentleman named Lucas Myers? He's in band? Okay. He sure does, yeah, he's section leader now. So Lucas last year he said the clock when we did this exercise, and I was like, Lucas, what's your response to the clock? And he said, when I sit in your class, I stare up at the clock and realize that the seconds are ticking by until my own death. And I was like,
Sounds like Lucas.
and I said, do you treat all your teachers so sweetly, Lucas? And he just kind of stared at me deadpan and didn't really want to answer the question. So, that was definitely seared in my own memory. So I always think of Lucas when I say the clock. He's wild. Okay, who else? Sophie, what'd you write down?
Okay, so have you guys ever heard of the back rooms?
Yeah.
It's like this creepy thing. I don't even know how to explain it. That's what the lights remind me of. Like those yellow lights. I don't know, it kinda creeps me out. It reminds me of I don't know, they just creep me out. The fluorescent lights and then the two yellow ones. I don't
The
like
fact that they're different colors from the
Well,
others.
just the fluorescent it makes the room look all creepy and I'm in a hospital.
Okay, yeah, so kind of creepy hospital vibes.
Yeah.
I don't know what the back room is, and I'm afraid to ask because I'm so easily frightened that I don't want to know. I don't even want to ask about it. So okay, good, that's a good one. So you had a kind of an unsettled feeling from the lights. Maddie,
The chairs were sitting there.
comfy. Okay, that's a good thing. Chairs. So that was a feeling. Comfy. Andrew,
The walls,
nobody's done the walls yet. What did you have as a response to the walls?
they're just weird, they make me uneasy. Like there's two white brick walls and then there's one dark green brick wall and then whatever that is. Cream, gray, I don't know.
It's a little bit, if you're used to a classroom that has posters and windows and it's a little bit prison-y. Some people have commented in the past, so.
It's basic, that's what I put, what's the new classroom's just basic.
Yeah, I said they bring on the bored/nervous nature, cause it's you stare at a gray wall and you're kind of bored, but also it makes you kind of nervous cause gray's just that color that you're do I trust gray, I don't know. It's not bright, but it's not dark.
So somebody who ascribes emotion to color is my spirit animal. So I really feel that. That was great. Yes. Do I trust gray? I love that. Thank you. Brandon, you and your.
The same as AC too, just how it reminds me how cold it is in here.
You're cold?
Yeah, whenever I first walked in, but ain't no more.
Wow. I guess I'm hot natured. They're always whenever they take my temperature when I go get my allergy shots, I'm always too hot and they have to wait for me to cool down and prove that I don't have COVID or whatever. So yeah. Cold. And I'll pick on one more person, maybe two more people. Emily, what'd you write down?
The sounds of the pens and pencils, writing.
Good. Did you have any response? Okay. Sound of the pens. And Taylor, did I already harass you?
I said the stacks of chairs.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Thank you. So, when you put all this together, you have a pretty living, full picture of a classroom and what it's like to be in a college classroom that's very quiet when everybody's writing. But there are some weirdly uneasy things about it. It's not that I wish it was a happier environment, aesthetically. With aesthetics, they're not super great. So that's just an example. That's just some practice on how to take double entry notes. If you look at your schedule, if you look at your homework for next time, here's what I want you to do for Monday. So this is your homework for Monday. And it's on the schedule, but if you want to add any more notes, you can. So we tried this out, we've done this a little bit together. For Monday, what you're going to do, just like I did in that example piece of paper that I gave you, you are gonna go to your bedroom, and you're gonna sit there for a much longer period of time than you just did, and I want you to use thick description and take double entry notes on your bedroom, on the place that you sleep. I want you to observe that. Now, obviously, if there's anything that you don't want me to know about, you can just skip over it. You don't have to do thick description on the bong that's in the corner. But, for whatever you feel comfortable writing about, you need to do thick description, double entry notes, just like we just did, and just like the example that I gave you, on your bedroom. Lengthwise, what I would like you to have is a couple of pages. And if you're doing it, if you're handwriting it on a piece of notebook paper, that's not two pieces of paper, that's a front and a back of a piece of paper. That counts, that's fine. You can have as much as you want. We're gonna be turning this into something later, so I want you to have at least just a couple of pages of double entry notes. Single space, don't double space them out. Don't do the margins like this. A lot of times people have like a piece of paper and they'll write some big ass title, so they're not writing until like half a page down. Don't do that. You know what I'm looking for, you know what I'm expecting. So a couple of pages of double entry notes on your bedroom. And again, you're separating your input, what you're smelling, feeling, seeing, from your emotional response. Remember that emotional response can take lots of different forms. What you're gonna do for Monday by 11:59 p.m. is just take a picture of those notes and get those to me. You can do that, if you have added me on Snap, that's actually probably the easiest way, because you can literally just take the picture and send it directly to me. So that's fine. You can send it via the Discord, you can direct message me on Discord, or the most official way to do it, you can send it via RaiderNet. You can attach the photo to the email and just email it to my RaiderNet email, BoldenME. Any of those ways work. Whatever way works best for you. I don't know how attaching pictures works on Edmodo, so I would go with either Discord, Snapchat, or RaiderNet email. But basically just photograph those notes to prove to me that you did it. I do want them to be handwritten. Unless you have like a broken hand or some kind of reason which you can explain to me later why you can't handwrite. I will occasionally ask you to do things by hand, because I think actually as a culture we are losing our ability to handwrite. It is going out the window. Cursive's already gone. Cursive is already a lost cause, so we can at least try to save handwriting. So I do want it handwritten. I do want you to just draw the line down the middle. But your homework for Monday is to just do those notes on your bedroom and send them to me. And then I'll give you instructions after that. Now the last thing I want to do today, in the 10 minutes before we go, is just give you another example of really good thick description. And that is a book called Lord of the Flies. And I will still pay attention to the time, so don't worry. So how many of you had to read Lord of the Flies in high school? That's great. I'm so happy that even as many of you raised your hands as did, because a lot of schools are cutting it out now. I used to teach 9th grade, and this was my favorite book out of all the books that I used to teach a long time ago. So here's the situation with Lord of the Flies. A group of English schoolboys in the 50s, this is an alternate version of the 1950s. And the Cold War has become a hot war. And we are fighting the Soviets and everybody else, and a group of young schoolboys gets evacuated from England because it's about to get bombed, but their plane gets shot down, and they crash on a deserted island somewhere in the South Pacific. And so at the beginning of the book, they're like, well, we're still going to be civilized English boys. We're going to have law and order, and we're going to follow the rules, and we're going to do things the right way. And this little fight breaks out about who gets to be chief, and there's this little kid named Jack. And then a month passes, and then this is what Jack is up to. So I want us to read this together and then kind of talk about the thick description aspect and what conclusions we can draw about Jack by the way that William Golding wrote this. Again, I'm just having you read this before you go because it's a really good example of thick description. Okay, so Hannah, would you read that first paragraph?
Jack was bent double, he was down like a sprinter, his nose only a few inches from the human earth. The tree trunks and the creepers that festooned them lost themselves in a green dusk 30 feet above him, and all about was undergrowth. There was only the faintest indication of a trail here, a cracked twig, and what might be the impression of one side of the foot. He lowered his chin and stared at the traces as though he would force them to speak to him. Then dog-like, uncomfortably, on all fours, yet unheeding his
stole forward 5 yards and stopped. Here was a loop of creeper with a tendril pendant from a node. The tendril was polished on the underside. Pigs passing through the loop brushed in with creepers hip high.
Jack crouched with his face a few inches away from this clue, then stared forward into the semi-darkness of the undergrowth. His sandy hair, considerably longer than it had been when they dropped in, was lighter now, and his bare back was a mass of dark freckles and peeling sunburn. A sharpened stick about 5 feet long trailed from his right hand, and except for a pair of tattered shorts held up by his knife belt, he was naked. He closed his eyes, raised his head, and breathed in gently with flared nostrils, assessing the current of warm air for information. The forest and he were very still. Riley, would you read that second paragraph that starts with that?
At length he let out his breath and on long sigh opened his eyes. They were bright blue eyes that in his frustration seemed bolting and nearly mad. He passed his tongue across dry lips and scanned the uncommunicative forest. Then again he stole forward and cast this way and that over the ground.
Josh, would you read the next paragraph?
The silence of the forest was more oppressive than the heat, and at this hour of the day there was not even the whine of insects. Only when Jack himself roused a gaudy bird from a primitive nest of sticks was the silence shattered and echoes set ringing by a harsh cry that seemed to come out of the abyss of ages. Jack himself shrank at this cry with a hiss of indrawn breath, and for a minute became less a hunter than a furtive thing, ape-like among the tangle of trees. Then the trail, the frustration claimed him again, and he searched the ground avidly. By the trunk of a vast tree that grew pale flowers on its gray bark, he checked, closed his eyes, and once more drew in the warm air. And this time his breath came short. There was even a passing pallor in his face. And then the surge of blood again. He passed like a shadow under the darkness of the tree and crouched, looking down at the trodden ground at his feet.
The droppings were warm. They lay piled among turned earth. They were olive green, smooth, and they steamed a little. Jack lifted his head and stared at the inscrutable masses of creeper that lay across the trail. Then he raised his spear and sneaked forward. Beyond the creeper, the trail joined a pig run that was wide enough and trodden enough to be a path. The ground was hardened by an accustomed tread, and as Jack rose to his full height, he heard something moving on it. He swung back his right arm and hurled the spear with all his strength. From the pig run came the quick, hard patter of hoofs, a castanet sound, seductive, maddening, the promise of meat. He rushed out of the undergrowth and snatched up his spear. The pattering of pigs' trotters died away in the distance. Okay, so Jack started out in the beginning of the book as this well-behaved little child. He's about 12. He is really big about how he's the leader of the choir, like he's the section leader of the choir. He says, I can hit a C sharp. There you go. He thinks he should be chief because of that. A month later, what has happened to him? Based on the sections that we just read together, how would you describe this child? What adjectives would you use? Good, savage. What else?
A gruff hunter. Gruff, he's all he's dirty, matted.
Gruff. And a hunter. What else?
Yeah.
Hungry.
He is absolutely overwhelmed by his own primal need for meat. His hunger has completely taken over him. Anything else? Any other words you'd use to describe him based on this? It's kind of an example of show not tell. He could have just said, man, a month later Jack had gone completely savage and he was just obsessed with getting meat. But he shows you with the description. This kid has gone from being obsessed with hitting the right high notes to literally crawling on the ground on all fours, putting his face in pig droppings to trap the pigs. And he's covered in dirt and sunburn and gross. All of his clothes are gone except these tattered bits of shorts. And you can kind of feel the way he writes it, how oppressive the jungle is. How hot and sweaty and gross. It probably helps that we are in late August ourselves, and it's not really a huge stretch of the imagination from Tennessee to imagine that heat. But he really, really paints that picture. He talks about all sorts of sensory details, the sound of pig hooves, the heat coming off of the pig poop. I mean, it's gross, but you definitely get the feeling of what it's like to be in that moment. And it's a huge red flag for the reader, because it's oh, what happened to Jack? And the whole idea is that basically they're kind of becoming Neanderthals. They're devolving and going back to animals. And it's kind of foreshadowing for some other things that Jack is gonna start to do later in the book, because he's not the only one who is devolving back to an animal. But this is just a good example of thick description that I wanted to show you. I could have posted it for you, but it's actually really hard to find in the book, so that's all I wanted to show you now. So, you have, like I said, completed your in-portion section of the course. So if you have any other questions for me, just stick around at the end of class. But you are free to go, and what I want from you on Monday is your double entry thick description notes from your bedroom. So just give me a couple of pages. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know, but have a great weekend, and I will see you on Edmodo and on the Discord. Everybody take care and be safe.
So I was gonna say a question, and you literally already said it.
No, please, that's what, I
Okay,
want
so-
people to ask questions.
You know, you said like a couple pages, you literally explained it. So you mean like front and back,